All right, so welcome. I am going to talk about grad school first. So just get, let's see, chat. All right, so we'll get going here. Hopefully you can see that all right. So what do we mean by graduate school? So what we mean by graduate school is degree after your bachelor's degree. And in the STEM fields, that's really talking about a master's and a PhD. So there might be professional schools that you could go to. I'm not going to address those quite as much here. We will look at some data from salaries and so forth from professional schools, but professional schools would be more like a PA school or dental school or those kind of professional degrees that you might have. But if you're going in straight sciences or even engineering or math, you would likely get a master's degree, which could be an MA or an MS. And then the other degree that is possible is a PhD, which is a Doctor of Philosophy. Although you don't really do much in philosophy, it's in your field, it's just the name of the degree. So you have some options after you get your bachelor's degree. You can do a 2-year degree, about 2 years to get a master's degree, and then you can go on from there to get a PhD. Or you can just, from a bachelor's degree, go straight to get a PhD. And that's actually what I did, is I just got my bachelor's degree and went right to a PhD program. And that's really more common in most of the sciences, is just to go straight to get your PhD. So to get your PhD, we'll talk about that process, but it takes about 5 years or so. And sometimes what happens is if you get started maybe on a PhD program, what you can do if you don't like the direction that that's happening, or you want to change your mind and either change your area that you're focusing on or change your school, you might decide to turn what you thought was your PhD pathway into a master's. And then from a master's, you can kind of pivot into a different direction. So sometimes people get masters because they are headed for a PhD and then they decide for some reason to kind of change that. And so that's another kind of option, is you can start in this direction and then you can kind of pivot and say, oh, I just want to make this a master's. And then maybe I want to go to a different field and study. Maybe I want to decide that I don't like grad school that much after all, and I'm going to go and get a job right after getting a master's. So there's a little bit of flexibility there. If you think you want a PhD, I would advise to kind of go straight to the PhD, because sometimes getting the master's and then a PhD takes a little longer, because that work that you do for your PhD does really take a long time of research, several years of research. So sometimes if you stop and do that master's and then say you switch directions, it might take you a little longer. It's all kind of flexible. It all depends on how your research is going. It depends on the professor that you're doing research for, the school that you're at, and kind of what the norms are for all of those kinds of things. And so it's all kind of can be kind of flexible. So that's why I have like about 3 to 4 years, about 5 years. Some people do it in 4, some people do it in 8, so it just depends on how things are going. And we'll talk about those factors along the way. But after you get your PhD, then that's when you can be called like doctor, whatever. So Dr. Pfeiffer, because I have my PhD. After you get your PhD, you can go right into the workforce. But sometimes, depending on the kind of job you want, you might do a postdoc. So it's a postdoctorate job. So it's a job that's intended to be just a short period of time, like a year or 2 or 3, depending on the project and the field. And that's just to give you more experience, maybe in a different area, before you go on to a job. So postdocs, tend to kind of be required if you want certain kinds of jobs. And what happens, we'll see, is that when you get your PhD, your research ends up being very narrowly focused on this one area. And so sometimes what you do is a postdoc that kind of broaden your learning into a different area as you're working as a postdoc. So we'll talk briefly about some postdoc opportunity kind of places where postdocs might work as well. So that's what we're really talking about in the grad school. So it's after your bachelor's degree. And I didn't mention it, but if you have any questions along the way, just let me know. Just, go ahead and unmute and ring in, and I'll try to keep up chat as well. So if you have any questions, you can put them in chat too. All right, so why might you want to go to grad school? Well, you might want to learn more about the field that you're majoring in. So once you get into your junior, senior year, the upper level courses, you might realize that when you get that bachelor's degree, you're just kind of scratching the surface of your field. There's so much more that you don't know that you might just want to learn more about, and you might really get interested in something. You might decide that your career path requires that you have a graduate degree. And we'll talk about kind of different career paths in academia, in industry, so non-academic job kind of situations. And you might realize that for the kind of work that you want to do, you're going to need a graduate degree. Or maybe you want to be able to decide which research avenues to follow. So you might want more responsibility. What we'll find when you have just a bachelor's degree, and even to some extent a master's degree, you're kind of always working under someone who's kind of telling you which direction to follow in your research. And things are a little bit more wide open to you if you have a PhD. You get to decide have much more of that responsibility of deciding what kind of research you want to do. And maybe one of the most important factors maybe is to make more money, right? So let's look at that further. This is in 2023, and what we have is the median weekly earnings and the unemployment rate. And so these are the different levels, and this is from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the US Bureau of Labor Statistics, and they put this out every year. So this is less than a high school diploma. You're not making very much, right? Your weekly earnings are pretty low, and unemployment is pretty high. So not a good thing. You all know that because you got your high school diploma. So that's a step up, but it's still kind of, below an average of all workers. It's not a lot to live on, hard to make ends meet that way. So you're going to college, so you come up this far. So now you're at the place where you have some college, not your degree yet, so you're getting better. Associate's degree gets you a little further, but as most of you know, you're all going for your bachelor's degree, right? So the bachelor's degree, now that's the bigger jump, right? So now once you get your bachelor's degree, you've gone beyond the all workers, so like the average, right? And so you're going to be making a lot more. That's a significant jump from the associate's degree, and it's easier to find a job, right? So then the advanced degrees are beyond this. So here's the master's, gets you some more earning power, and you're still, a little bit lower unemployment, right? So easier to find a job. Professional degree, so that's the maybe a lawyer, a doctor, those kind of things. And then this is the doctoral degree. So professional degrees, they do make a little bit more than doctoral degrees, but very similar. Both a significant jump from the master's to the professional degree or the PhD, bigger jump even than from the bachelor's degree to the master's degree. So earning money is an important thing, right? And so that might be one reason that factors into getting that degree as well. For me, it was kind of, I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to teach. And at the time, I didn't realize that there were two colleges. We'll talk about that, which just require a master's degree. So I was really motivated to get my PhD because I wanted to teach at college. And I kind of wanted also just to kind of go as far as I could in a field, right? That's the highest degree you can get in your field. And I just like to go things all the way, right? So that might be another reason why you want to go for a PhD. So let's talk about the different areas then. If you want to go into academia, you can be teaching either at the high school level, the 2-year college level, 4-year college, or more like a university that has a graduate program. So you could be teaching at any of those places. And depending on what you want to do, that determines how much education you need. So you can have a bachelor's degree and teach high school. That's pretty common. To teach high school, you can also have a master's degree. So usually for all of these, you can have a higher degree and still do that. But this is the minimum degree needed. So in high school, you usually have to have a bachelor's degree in your major, and then you also have to have some education courses enough that it's like either a second major or like a minor. To teach at a 2-year college, such as Century College or Normandale College, a master's degree is usually required in the STEM fields. It is in Minnesota anyway. And so that's required for the to teach at a 2-year college. To teach at a 4-year college, you need a PhD, pretty much. In some disciplines, you might have other degrees, but in STEM disciplines, you usually have to have a PhD. And if you want to teach at like a program that has a graduate program, so like the University of Minnesota, you're going to need a PhD, and probably a postdoc is required as well. So when you add that graduate program that you're teaching in, most schools like to see that you've had a little bit more experience beyond that PhD, so that you've had some, maybe broadened your research experience. So you've done a postdoc in a different area that's doing research in a different area, and just has a little bit more experience. So that's if you want to go to academia. If you want to go into industry, there's different, I kind of, as a chemist, we kind of consider it academia and industry. But industry could be a company like 3M or Medtronic or something like that. But it could also, you could also work for a state lab or a national lab. And so those are kind of all kind of similar here in the expectations at the work field. So if you're working in one of those places, so non-academia places, and you have a bachelor's degree, first of all, it doesn't really matter if you have a Bachelor of Arts or Bachelor of Science. So some programs have Bachelor of Science is a little bit more rigorous in the science and math areas than their Bachelor of Arts degree. So in some places it's not. So I went to the College of St. Benedict for undergraduate work, and because it was a liberal arts college, all of our degrees were BA degrees. So I actually have a Bachelor of Arts degree, even though it was in chemistry, and it was a certified by the American Chemical Society degree. So really, it doesn't matter. Nobody's going to care if you have a BA or a BS. So either one of those is fine. And then when you're doing that, the kind of work that you do is usually you're kind of doing the work in the lab. I'm always kind of viewpoint of science degrees is kind of what I'm thinking of. Engineering is somewhat similar, but a little bit different. So for a bachelor's degree in the sciences, you'd work for someone who kind of directs your research. You're in lab most of the time. You kind of report back to your boss, the director, and that director is going to kind of make the major decisions as to which which path you're going to follow. Like you're going to making the day-to-day decisions, but if there's big decisions as to which project you're going to continue working on or stop this project and start another one, the person that's your boss is going to be doing that. If you get a master's degree in the sciences, it's pretty similar to a bachelor's degree. So in chemistry, for example, you can see the jobs that are listed in chemistry. They are listed in a lot of them are listed in a magazine that we have, Chemical Engineering News, Chemical and Engineering News. And in the back of there, you can look at job ads, and most of the job ads that they're either bachelor's or master's required, or then it's PhD required. So the master's kind of gets lumped into the bachelor's in terms of in industry, the kind of how the work that you would do. It doesn't really get you much further than a bachelor's degree in terms of the kind of work that you do. It might get a little bit better pay. Engineering is a little bit different. A master's in engineering gets you at about the same level as a PhD in a science field. So when I got my PhD in chemistry, I knew I wanted to teach, but I wanted that experience of going to a place in industry and doing a job search that included that, so I could kind of see what it was like and make sure I wasn't missing out and just, have that experience. So I interviewed for jobs in industry, and I was at this one company, and I was interviewing for a job with a PhD, and he was interviewing for the same job with a master's in engineering, and mine was a PhD in physical chemistry, and it was for the same job. And so the engineering degree kind of gets you a little further if you go to a master's, and that's because the bachelor's degree is pretty rigorous. If you're going for an engineering degree, the bachelor's degree is like you take in 3 or 4 science and math courses every semester, and it's pretty rigorous and pretty laid out, as not a lot of flexibility. So because of that, your education is a little sped up, and so the master's degree gets you a little further in engineering itself. So the master's for science, the master's is kind of like the bachelor's. It doesn't get you a whole lot further. That's why I would say most people who want to go to graduate school kind of go try to get that PhD, unless they know they're going to kind of switch positions. Or so if you're thinking about graduate school in the straight sciences anyway, I would say, head for that PhD. And the PhD is you would spend most of your time kind of directing the research when you have a job at that. You end up not having a ton of time in lab. So if you really love being in lab and you don't really care, so much about which direction you're going and you're fine with that, a bachelor's degree might be the kind of work that you want to do. But if you want to have a little bit more direction in what you're going to be researching and kind of making those managing major decisions, and then possibly managing other people to do some of the in-lab research for you, then a PhD might be something that you want to do. So as a PhD, you're going to have more like a research group of bachelor's degree people working under you, that kind of a thing. So the higher you go, the more you'll kind of manage and direct, and the less you'll be, washing dishes in lab in chemistry. So that's kind of the way that it goes. On the flip side of that, though, too, is when you get a PhD, there's more. Sometimes those positions aren't as plentiful as the bachelor's degree positions, and so you might have to you can't be as selective as to where you want to work necessarily. You might have to move to get the job that you want, right? So in the Twin Cities, if you like the Twin Cities, that's great because it's a nice metropolitan area, and we have a lot of STEM jobs for being in the Midwest. If you wanted to work in a smaller town in the Midwest, you might not be so lucky. But the Twin Cities, we have lots of companies that hire scientists. So it's pretty good. Another good Midwestern town that has lots of jobs, of course, is like Chicago, right? So like major metropolitan areas, of course, will have lots of PhD positions out there. But if you wanted to work in a really small town, you might be able to find work as a bachelor's degree in STEM, but maybe not so much in a PhD. A lot of the major jobs are in, the more metropolitan areas, so the East and West Coast, and then the bigger cities in the Midwest. So, so the higher up you go, kind of the less selective you can be in terms of exactly where you work. So that's just something to keep in mind as well. But the Twin Cities were pretty fortunate having great companies in the Twin Cities. All right, so before we go on then, I want you to get a chance to interact a little bit. And so if you want to share any thoughts as to what your career ideas are, are you thinking a little bit more academia? Are you thinking more into industry or a national lab? Have you thought about the kind of work that you want to do? Anyone want to share at all? Kind of either what level, if you want to stay in a bachelor's, if you're thinking about a PhD, or kind of have you thought about what kind of a career job you would like?
I'm thinking towards a PhD in one of the one of the fields I'm thinking. I don't know if it's gonna be chemistry or physics. I'm pretty sure it's gonna be chemistry.
Okay,
But yeah, that's all I know.
that's all you know. All right, that's good. That's something.
My goal right now is just to stay in a bachelor's for computer science, but maybe eventually go into a master's potentially.
Okay. Yeah, in computer science, I don't know a ton about the job possibilities. That might be something you might want to. I saw Amy Larson from Augsburg is on your schedule for doing some computer lab skill stuff. So you might want to ask her too about the possibilities when you do a master's or a PhD, kind of what jobs that opens up to you versus bachelor's, because computer science is an area that moves really quickly. And so it might be that a bachelor's gets you really far, and then you always are going to be doing some kind of training after a bachelor's to kind of get trained in new things that come up and maybe little new areas. And so, yeah, that might be a little bit different than the science that I was talking about. Yep. Anyone else want to share at all? Okay, so thanks for sharing, Devin and Ashley. Um, so let's talk a little bit about what you'll be doing in graduate school. So in graduate school, you're going to do a lot of research and problem solving. So that's a most of what you're going to be doing. And you're going to find out kind of what that's like in this program. This program that you're in, you're going to get a little of that. In graduate school, it's like a lot of it, right? And I read somewhere about graduate school is a transition from being a consumer of knowledge, where you're learning things, to a creator of it. So what's going to happen is you're going to pick a research project, and you're going to be working so many years on that research project, and it's going to be very narrowly focused. And so you're going to be the one that's the leading edge of that research. You're going to will be doing as much in that specific project as you are, right? That will know as much in that specific. You're going to be creating those that information that other people are going to be consuming, right? All right. So, what is research? So you're finding out, talk a little bit here. Research is a process of steps used to collect and analyze information to increase our understanding of a topic or issue. So that's kind of one. These are a couple of quotes from a book that just talks about what research is by Cresswell. So it consists of 3 steps. You can kind of divide it into posing a question, collecting the data to answer that question, and then presenting an answer to the question. So if only it were that simple, right? I like this quote by Einstein that says, if we knew what we were doing, it wouldn't be research. So that's really what you're diving into, something that nobody knows the answer to this. It's not something you can look up. It's not something somebody else has done. You're kind of doing it to try to answer this question or to learn more about this topic, right? Or to prove this hypothesis right or wrong. And so it's really diving into something that nobody knows the answer to, right? And so we go in with our best guesses and our best judgment as to how to design a project to answer this question. but we're going to make mistakes because nobody's done this before. It's like, oh, it's like all the lights are off and we're trying to find our way around somewhere, right? And we got to feel our way around and just kind of best guess as to what's going on and kind of feel things and like to try to get our reference and our bearing and figure out what's in front of us. And so we're just kind of, feeling around in the dark. And that's kind of what research is like sometimes. So far, with your experience with research, you've probably been introduced to a research project. And so have you figured out any kind of differences, anything new about research that's different from being in a lab? So far, kind of your lab experience is just being in a lab. How is research different than that? What do you think? Any ideas? Anything pop into your head?
I feel like it's a bit more independent.
Independent? Oh, very good. Yeah. Other ways to describe it? Okay, Chris, thanks for sharing. And we'll talk about that too. We're going to talk first just about the kinds of research that you might have. So sometimes you could divide this up into basic research versus applied research. So basic research, you're going to gain a more comprehensive understanding of the subject and not necessarily be worried so much about the applications to it. And so you're kind of learning for the sake of learning. Why is this way, right? And oftentimes, what happens is, you're really kind of at the fundamental ideas of if it's physics, like how physics works, or chemistry, how things work. You might see something in nature and try to understand what's going on there. So you have that hypothesis, you design and conduct experiments to test them. So that's kind of similar to all the research that you've done. But you're just not worried so much about, a cure for cancer or something, about the application of it at the moment, right? You're just understanding it for the sake of understanding, kind of. And basic or applied research, basic versus applied research. So basic or pure, sometimes it's called research. You usually have to be funded by grants because what happens is like, companies that want to make a profit really want to apply what their research to make that profit, right? And so oftentimes, if you're interested in just understanding for the sake of understanding, you have to get into maybe an academic program where you would be funded by grants that are maybe the National Science Foundation or various departments of energy grants or something like that. So the federal government funds a lot of pure kind of research. On the flip side of that is you might be really interested in solving some problem that is more applied, right? So the goal is to solve some kind of real world problem or develop a product or service that meets a specific need. If you really like that applied aspect, then maybe instead of working at in academia or working in a national or a lab or something, which would be more basic, your applied research would be more like in industry, like at 3M or Medtronic or Ecolab or something like that, where you're creating a product that gets applied, creating a service that gets applied, right? And so at 3M, I know that they have had most of the time, depends on the CEO, but most of the time they've had maybe 10% of their time is allowed to do any kind of research they want. So that could be kind of basic research if they want, but the rest of it needs to be, for the company where they're trying to develop a product that they're going to sell, for example. But out of that kind of playing around in any 10% of you can do whatever you want. Some scientists are just playing around with early on applications and stuff, and that eventually will make the company money, but it has a bigger timeline. So it might be more fundamental. it might not be. But at an industrial company like that, you don't have much time of your time devoted to just understanding stuff, right? So you don't have much time just devoted to that basic research. Okay. And some research is a mix of both, but some research is clearly kind of in that basic area, and some is more in that applied area. If you're doing basic research, you would be publishing your results in peer-reviewed journals. If your research is really applied, it depends. If you're working for a company, a lot of times you can't publish until maybe after your product is gone to market and sold, or you're more into having not so much publishing the results, but you'll have patents for things. So you might have some patents in your resume, that you've developed. So that's kind of the two different areas of research that might happen. Let's talk about what you do actually in graduate school. And just let me know if you have any questions along the way. So the first 2 years, you're going to be taking classes mainly, and then you'll be either a teaching assistant or a research assistant. So most of the time, you're a teaching assistant. So what happens is when you go to graduate school, the graduate schools are bigger programs because they're universities, right? So they're bigger schools. And so they usually have TAs, teaching assistants, maybe like in chemistry, the traditional style of the university is that you have lecture a couple days a week, and then you have more like a recitation section a couple days a week where you work problems in smaller groups, and then you have lab. So usually what happens is the professor has the lecture twice a week, but then if you're in a recitation or a small group discussion kind of thing, the TA runs those, and the TA is also running the lab. So if you're in a large school then, where you would be for getting a PhD, the first 2 years while you're taking your classes, you're also being a TA for the lab or those recitations and lab. And so usually that's what the case is. And so when you're taking classes, unlike now where you're probably taking 4 classes at a time, you might only be taking 2 classes at a time in graduate school. And those classes don't really have labs usually. So they're just the learning material. And so your time is a lot less in the class part, and it's a little bit more, you're adding on that, you might be a tutor now, but you're adding on being a TA. So it's a little bit more teaching, right? So you're doing that for the 2 years. And so if you have a master's program, then at the same time, you'll be researching your master's during that time. If you're in a PhD, you usually join a research group by the end of your year 1. So in year 2, while you're taking those classes and TAing, you're trying to start in on your research project. Now you don't usually have tons of time on it, and sometimes what happens, at least in different fields like physical chemistry, you'll join a group, and that group, your research group, consists of smaller groups within that research group. So one faculty member has a research group, and then they might have different projects that they're working on. And as the end of your first year, you'll join one of those projects. And so on that project, there might be you who just finished your first year, or there might be a 3rd-year graduate student, maybe a postdoc, kind of all working on that same project. So there's kind of smaller teams within that research group. Some areas aren't quite like that. Organic chemistry, a lot of times you have your own project and you're not really working with other people quite as much. So by the end of year 1 anyway, you're going to join a research group. So any extra time you have then, you can start learning that research kind of like you are now. Yeah, if you do a master's first, yeah, the master's, it's going to be about the same thing. You're going to maybe not quite have as many classes in year 2 because you're going to have to focus more on your research. But yep, it's the same kind of thing. You would join your research group by the end of the year 1, and then you start working on your master's project. So your master's project is going to be a smaller project compared to your PhD project in the amount of time that it would take to do. But you'd still be kind of working on that in year 2. Yep. So as I said, the research group is led by a faculty member. So that's your research advisor, it's called. And that group, that the one faculty member has, this whole group consists of various graduate students and maybe some postdocs, right? So when I was in graduate school, my faculty advisor probably had about 12 people total in his group, 12 to 15, something like that. And he had 4 different projects. So we had 3 or 4 people per project, kind of. And then within that project, you kind of had your own little sub project, but you first kind of learned what like I learned what my 3rd year graduate student was doing, how the system, because it was physical chemistry, and we had a laser system and a big container where we had vacuum pumps pump out the gas in there, and we put in the gas we wanted. So it was small molecules, gas-based stuff. And so it was a big apparatus, basically, that you had to learn how to use. And so as I was learning kind of how to use that, I was helping him take his data for his PhD. And then as he took all his data and then started writing the next year his thesis, then I was using the instrument more for my research, and by that, second, third year, I was using it more for mine. So anyway, so those groups consist of a faculty member, and that's pretty traditional that the advisor, the faculty member advisor, has a few different projects going on. And then when you have that PhD, the rest of your time there, so 3rd, 4th, 5th years, you're doing research that whole time. And so if you have that master's degree, the idea is that, you're doing heavy research in that towards the end of your 1st year and into your 2nd year, and then you're wrapping up your project soon after that. And then if you have a PhD, then the 3, 4 or 5 years is all research. So, or year 5, you're kind of trying to wrap things up and write your PhD, your thesis at the time. Yes, so there's a question in chat about funds, and so we'll talk about that. Yep, it's coming. So, good question. So, while you're in graduate school, you can be pretty, and probably most of the PhDs are more kind of basic research, because a lot of research that's happening at universities is not, their goal isn't to necessarily cure cancer. Maybe their goal is to, start understanding the processes in which cancer starts and that kind of thing. But it's far away from that practical application. So it'd be considered kind of more basic research. All right, so this is the question I was kind of getting at. If you've already had a taste of a little bit about research, how graduate school is different than undergrad. So graduate school, when you go to graduate school, it's your job. So right now, you probably have a job, you're going to school, you're doing this research this summer, but you probably have a job other than that. You might. In graduate school, you really can't have another job, right? But we're going to talk about that's okay. So it's your full-time job, right? So you're spending all your time going to classes, being a TA, and doing your research, right? It's mainly kind of that research and problem solving, right? So what that means is it's not like lab work. Lab work, in labs and classes, professors try to figure out in 3 hours a project where we can get you to understand what we're doing, take some data, analyze that data, get a result. That makes sense, right? In 3 hours, all right? If you have no idea about this problem and how to solve this problem, it's going to take a lot of starts and stops and a lot of successes and failures, a lot of failures that you have to understand what went wrong and try to fix things and redo it, a lot of trial and error, right? So that's a lot of what research is like in problem solving. It's a lot of trial and error, but it's a big payoff because then you're learning something and advancing this field in ways that nobody else has. And this stuff isn't published anywhere. You're going to publish it somewhere for other people to read, right? But it's very kind of different. Because of that, it can be kind of high intensity because you need to, you know, in years 3, 4, and 5, you need to collect this data, really 3 and 4, collect this data because you're going to want to finish this project up. And if things aren't working right in lab or your system is broken and you have to fix it, and so it can be kind of high intensity at times, right? It's more focused, as I mentioned before, when you get this bachelor's degree, you'll find a little bit of the different fields in your discipline, the different areas in your discipline. And then you realize like there's all this stuff you don't know. But in graduate school, instead of advancing on all of those areas, you kind of pick one and you go really deep into that area, right? And so it's really focused in your specialty. So you're going to be the person who knows the most about your research project in the whole world, right? About that specific thing you're researching. You're going to know the most. But so it's really focused. You don't know about the rest of physical chemistry or the rest of the field. So I know about my area in physical chemistry, and it gets really focused and specialized. Graduate school is less structured than undergrad, and it's more flexible. That is, when I went to undergrad, I had my classes in the morning, my labs in the afternoon, and if I didn't have a lab in the afternoon, I TA'd the lab in the afternoon. And so like I was busy from 8 to 5, and then did homework all evening, right? And so you're kind of busy all the time, right? Between working or being a TA, that was my work study, working, having classes, studying for those classes, doing the homework. You're really busy, right? So in graduate school, I said kind of 2 classes, right? Probably maybe they were 3 days a week, not even 5 days a week, and a couple labs that you TA, and then spend your time in lab. So it seems like it's a lot more flexibility. And then once you get into years 3, 4, 5, it is all research all the time. But you can research in the morning, afternoon, have the evenings off, or if you had an appointment in the morning, you can for something you can research in the afternoon, evening, right? So it's a little bit more flexible, more structured, or less structured, so you can be more independent about that as well. All right, so here's the big reveal. You get paid to go to graduate school. So if you were kind of tuning things out, I should have mentioned this in the beginning maybe, but if you were kind of tuning things out saying I can't afford it, you can. You can't have a job. This is your job. So they're paying you. Why are they paying you to go to school? Because you're being at TA. Even a living wage that a graduate student makes, which is enough to live on, not enough to get rich, right? It's enough to live on. It's still cheaper for the university to pay you that than to try to pay some faculty member to be teaching in those labs, right? So you get paid to go to graduate school. So this in all STEM fields I'm aware of, well, math, maybe it's fewer opportunities for this, but in the straight sciences, you get paid to go to graduate school. So your first couple of years are going to be a TA, right? After year 1, you join a group. So that professor of that group will have you probably year 2 be a TA as well. But then the professor of that group should be paying you in years 3, 4, and 5 to be just a research assistant, right? So that's all you have to do is being a research assistant, because that faculty member has applied for grants and has gotten money to support the research that they're doing. And so that money is to pay the grad students to be researchers, right? So the key there then is you have to be careful when you look at professors to make sure they have enough money, that they're getting in enough grants so that they support their graduate students, right? Because you don't want to have to be teaching in year 3, 4, and 5 because that's taking too much time away from your research. Your research is going to require your full time. If you pick a professor, some professors, and you'll know based on talking to grad students that were working for them when you're choosing a professor to work for. If that professor hasn't had enough grants coming in, they might make their graduate students teach beyond year 2, be a TA beyond year 2, which means that sometimes then those graduate students take longer to graduate because their research takes them longer if they're also being a TA, right? So it's like, at least in chemistry, it was like 95% of the faculty are, getting in enough money so that their grad students don't have to teach beyond year 2. But there's a couple faculty members out there who, students in their group take a longer time to graduate because they have to teach as well, right? So it's one of those questions you want to ask the grad students when you get to the point after your first year, during your first year, that you have to decide which professor to work under. You want to make sure that they have enough money to support it. And most will, but that's one thing to consider. So yeah, so you don't have to worry about paying for graduate school right now because they pay enough well, first of all, most schools waive your tuition. So you're not paying tuition to go to graduate school, right? They're waiving that. Plus they pay you enough to live off of. And so you have to kind of take that, they'll give you an offer when they offer you grad school, how much money it's going to be, and you have to figure out where that's at. So, if you're living in San Francisco, it might not be a living wage out there. I don't know, but it certainly is everywhere. Where I worked, and when I went to grad school, it wasn't an issue. It wasn't like I was making money, but I didn't have to take out loans, and I didn't have another job, and I could pay the rent and buy the food and do that kind of thing. So it's enough to live off. Okay, so that's the good news, that the grad schools pay you to go there. All right, so then we'll kind of talk a little bit in the nitty-gritty here for a few minutes anyway about just things to consider if you are thinking about grad school. And then I'll give you'll have the recording of this presentation, but I'll also give the PowerPoints to Jessica, and she can put them wherever or give them to you guys or Liz or whatever, so that you can reference this a little bit later as well if you're not really looking for grad schools right now, which you're not because you're looking probably for where to finish your 4-year degree. But things to keep in mind is location. So that's, it can be a bonus because it's maybe a 5-year commitment, and if you're ready to try out a new part of the United States, try out a new location, it's not so much that you're gonna have to live there forever, right? You can stay there for 5 years. So location is something you might want to consider. Or if you're tied to the Twin Cities, the U of M has great programs. The size of the program. So bigger programs have bigger opportunities sometimes for different areas of research within them, right? So if you go, I went to the University of Wisconsin-Madison. I knew I kind of wanted physical chemistry because I liked physics and liked chemistry. And there were like 5 different professors there that I thought their stuff was pretty cool, right? And so of those 5, I could kind of narrow down which one I liked in terms of research, which one I liked in terms of a personality, a person to join the program, etc. So I had some options, right? If you go to a smaller school, you might only have one professor there that has the kind of research you're interested in. And then you want to hope that they're taking research students and not too many in your year are interested in their programs so that you get chosen, right? Because research professors are usually, depending on the size of their group, they won't be able to take, every student that's interested necessarily. They might take 1 to 3 students every year or something, so it just depends on the program. The reputation of the school is something to consider, although it's when you get your PhD, your reputation of that degree is more linked to the professor you're working for than the school itself. So that's what I found when I was looking for jobs, when I interviewed for those industry jobs, and somewhat for schools as well. They were more interested in kind of the faculty member I worked with than the school I got my degree from. And you also, the research that's currently being done, you want to make sure there's enough people at that school doing research that you're interested in. Once you, in a couple of years, figure out kind of the research you're most interested in. And then, as I mentioned, we don't have to go through all of these details here. I have a couple more slides, 3 more slides after this one. But things to keep in mind is that that research advisor is an important decision, even more so than the school that you're going to for grad school. So the grad school decision, you know, just make sure you have enough faculty members there that are doing research that you could pick more than one group. And then, you know, be in a location that you want to be in for 5 years. So some of those things. But that research advisor decision is really important because each faculty member is a unique individual. They're going to have their own work expectations. They're going to have their own way that they deal with graduate students. They're going to have their own style. And that's going to be your boss for those, once you join that group, maybe the end of their first year. So that's going to be your boss for 4 years that you're going to work really closely with. You're going to do research. You're going to report the research to them. You're going to write papers together with that person. And so it's important that you get along with that person, right? And that they have expectations that match your expectations. So I said I went to University of Wisconsin-Madison, and there were, I had colleagues in the organic chemistry field, and there were some organic chemistry faculty who would expect their students to be working like 80 hours a week, not 40. That was just their expectation. They wanted to get ahead. They were young researchers with a lot of energy and expected the same from their students. And when you weren't there on a Saturday afternoon, you got a little sticky note on your desk that next time you came in, you had to talk to your faculty advisor because they were there and you weren't. And so, I mean, there are some expectations that, in my opinion, that was more unreasonable. The research group I joined had some graduate students who were married or had kids or had other lives. And so it was clear that my advisor had a better work life balance and something that I wanted. You know, I didn't want to have to be in lab 80 hours a week. And so that's something that's expectations, what the environment's like, their style. I loved my faculty advisor. I thought the world of him, and he was reasonable and he was likable. And I don't know that I could have done graduate school with somebody that I didn't think was like that, right? So grad school is tough enough. You need to make sure that you have a research advisor that you like. Also considering that they're well funded, right? So that they have enough funding that the grad students are in lab years 3, 4, 5, not TAing beyond that. And then I mentioned that their reputation is important because that's going to be linked to you, right? That I did research for this guy, I got my graduate graduate degree from this person. That's going to be kind of your reputation too. So the way that you figure all that out is you talk to the graduate students that are working with for that advisor, right? You talk to them and they'll give you the real scoop. There's no reason why they want to lie. They're going to tell you what the working conditions are like, whether they like this person or not, right? And then sometimes faculty will move in the middle of your PhD. So you'll have to decide, do you want to stay and work for someone else, or do you want to move schools with that person? And that happens just occasionally. So you might want to just feel out, you know, is this professor planning on staying there, or are they kind of intending to move somewhere? So those are some ideas to think about when making that important decision of choosing a research advisor, which is sometimes more important than the school itself. All right, so just to kind of wrap up, what kinds of things would you experience in grad school? So of course there's this anxiety of fitting in. You've experienced this when you come to college, right? You're going to probably experience it if you transfer. Some of you are in 2 colleges. If you transfer to another college to get a 4-year degree, there's that anxiety. It's a new environment, but it's also exciting because it's a new environment, right? In graduate school, more than any other time in my life, I made friends in graduate school that are kind of lifelong friends, and that we were friends for a long time in grad school. We still keep in contact, and occasionally we'll see each other. So there's this camaraderie of working hard, playing hard. That's what I experienced in grad school, and it's pretty common. There's an uncertainty of maybe it's teaching or for the first time, or running experiments totally on your own. Fortunately for you, you're getting that experience now of doing some research. You know what that's like. So maybe it won't be quite so uncertain, right? And there can be exhaustion of working hard, right? So I mentioned I had this system that's kind of hard to get up and running because it has vacuum pumps and all of that to get the what I'm working on is the small molecules, and then get the small molecules in there. So that there's the technical difficulties of that. And then I had 3 different laser systems, so that had to come in and do different things, and so all of those had to be working. So it was the kind of thing where you worked a lot to fix the problems to get things working, and then when the system was working, you like wanted to take data day and night until something in the system broke, right? And so that can happen too, that when things are going well, you want to just keep working hard. So a lot of times when things are going well, you might just work 80 hours that week, to get things done. And then when things kind of break, then maybe you'll work less, right? Because it's more frustrating. So sometimes because you're working so hard. But if you end up getting all that data, it feels really good. And then if you can even make sense of it and it proves your hypothesis or explains something that hasn't been done before, there's a lot of satisfaction in it. So you might have self-doubts while going through graduate school, just in the process. Maybe you've had that in undergrad too. You might say, why am I doing this, right? But you question things, and that's pretty common. But then maybe there are different hurdles along the way, and those hurdles depend on which program that you're in. So sometimes it might be an exam or a presentation, or maybe when you publish your first paper, it's going to be exciting and it's going to be exhilarating, right? So there's just a highs and lows. And then when you finally get that PhD, it's a big relief and you did it and it's exciting. And now everybody's going to call you doctor, right? Because you got that PhD. And so you have that pride in doing what you have. So just to wrap things up, these are a few quotes from an article I found when they had some people, oh, sorry, that's in a moment here. So just some final advice from me. It can be long and hard, but it's worth it in the end. Don't be afraid to ask questions. So asking questions is a sign that you're, understanding things and you're right there and then there's something you don't understand and you want to ask a question. If at some point in time, you're not going to understand everything and you're going to have to ask questions. And hopefully you're not afraid to do that. It's not going to show that you're stupid. I had a hard time asking questions. When I was an undergrad, I kind of understood things so I could figure things out on my own. In graduate school, I really needed to ask questions, and it took me a long time to learn that I was afraid that if I asked a question, somebody was going to think I was stupid because I should have known the answer to that. But it turns out you're always at some point where you need to ask those questions. And asking those questions doesn't actually make you look stupid. It makes you look smart because you're paying attention and you've thought about things, and everybody will recognize that. And everyone feels like quitting at some point, but you don't, and you keep going. You just have to keep that goal in mind. Why did you want to get that PhD? Did you need it for your job? Did you want to just get it because it's the highest degree that you can get? And you just have to hang in there. So once you get to graduate school, that's my advice to you. You can do this. So here are those quotes from other people. I read an article and I just liked some of these quotes from, this is an assistant professor in the University of Utah. Grad school is a very long roller coaster ride filled with ups and downs. Never make life-changing decisions when riding downhill. I think that's a good piece of advice. Another one is don't be afraid to fail. Not only will it happen a lot, but you also get the opportunity to learn from it and maybe even discover something interesting. So I think these apply not just in grad school, but in life, maybe in undergrad they're applying as well, right? And then the last one, pushing yourself past what you think your limit is worth it. You are capable of more than you know, right? So if you haven't yet seriously considered graduate school, the sign that the fact that you're in this program and working on some research means that you're thinking about your future, and graduate school will get you really far and you'll push through, push those limits, and you can do it. So thanks so much for having the opportunity to share graduate school with you. Are there any questions at all about graduate school?
How do you know what a professor's funding is?
Yeah, so the easiest way is to talk to the graduate students who work for that person. So like when you do a site visit, so most of the time when you go to graduate school, you apply, they invite you to come visit the program, or they offer you a position and then you can come visit the program. And then when you're visiting the program, your goal is to kind of talk to graduate students at that time. Also, since you don't have to pick a professor until the end of your year one, once you've gone to that graduate school, right? So you're in your first year, you want to be looking at the professors and what their research is based on what's on their website, probably, right? Do your research, looking at what they're doing, what sounds interesting to you. Have your list of maybe I like these 4 or 5 professors. Then in your spare time in their first year, kind of go to the labs and just start talking to grad students and just ask them, what year are you? How long did you have to teach? And so you can find out from the students themselves how things are run. You also can find out what that professor is like. So you really need to, once you're investigating the labs, you need to go and talk to the graduate students who work for that professor. Make sense?
Yep.
All right, other questions? All right, well, hopefully that was useful for you. The second part, what we're going to talk about is a personal statement. And for that, we're going to go through the different kinds of parts of a personal statement. And you're going to actually do at least some brainstorming for it, maybe even be writing a personal statement as we go. So it's going to be more interactive, at least with you and your thought process. Maybe we'll try to make it interactive with some of the other students as well, where you can share some things. But it is going to be kind of thinking through that and writing a rough draft of a personal statement. So I'd like to take maybe, let's see, a 10-minute break here so that we can use the restroom, do anything you need to do. And then we'll get back together and talk about personal statements. It'll be more interactive, so kind of get you going a little bit more. Sorry, this one was more presentation style, and hopefully it wasn't too boring for you, but the next one, hopefully you'll get a little bit more interactive, at least with you writing and engaged in things. Sound good? Maybe at 10:20, so we'll have a 10-minute break. I can grab that drink or something to eat, use the bathroom. Devin, did you have a question? You unmuted? All right, awesome. Okay, so we will see you back in 10 minutes. All right, welcome back. Hopefully you're back. So we are going to talk about personal statements. So a personal statement is often used in a few different places, and you might be able to write one and then use it in different ways. So one way that it's used is sometimes when a research program is looking for students for, say, we call them sometimes REUs, so research experiences for undergraduates. And that's like a 10-week summer program where it's your full-time job for 10 weeks. So those kind of RU programs exist in a lot of different places. You've probably heard about those. Some of those might require a personal statement or something similar. They'll ask you to answer some questions for that. A personal statement might also be used for a scholarship application. Okay, so we're going to talk about what personal statements are, and you're going to write one today with some help, at least a rough draft, or at least some notes. So depending on how you write, but at least it'll get you started, and you'll be able to have one kind of in your back pocket when you start applying for things like scholarships or summer research programs or something like that. Okay, so there are some resources here that might be helpful. Different places that talk about personal statements, some of which I've taken some of their tips, but you can reference them later. So you'll have this PowerPoint, a version of it, some sort, so you'll be able to use those resources. So as I mentioned earlier, I'd like you to either grab some pen and paper or open up a document if you're on your computer and start being able to take some notes because I think it'll be helpful. I've given this presentation before to my North Star STEM Alliance students and my STEM students in the past, and I've had at least on one occasion, one student said, "Oh yeah, by the end of that presentation, I almost had my entire personal statement, and then I applied for a scholarship right after that." And so it was kind of useful for that for one person. And sorry, Rian and Ashley, if you've heard this before, but we'll go through today. So we'll take some time during this presentation to have you do some brainstorming or writing and thinking about what you'll include in your personal statement. So hopefully this will be a good starting point at least. And many people write several drafts when they write things. I know my writing instructors always said, "Oh, just write kind of what comes to mind, and then you can edit it and make it sound better later." So that might be your thought process, in which case you'll be able to get a lot of that done today. I'm kind of don't write that way. I kind of like to perfect a sentence before I go on the next one, so it's very time consuming and painful for me to do that, and I go through fewer drafts that way. not how my English instructors recommended things. So depending on what your style is, whatever, maybe you'll just take notes today. So it's up to you. So that personal statement gives you an opportunity to use your own voice and make a case for yourself. So if you're thinking about, a scholarship, the people who are deciding who to give the scholarship to really want to know who you are and kind of want to understand you. And they want to give this to a person, and so they want to know that person, right? If you're applying to an RU, they need to know a lot about you, like where are you in your education and all that kind of stuff. But they also want to know how you might fit in different research projects. And so they just want to get to know you. So it's a time for you to have your own voice and make a case for yourself. Most personal statements will describe things like why this opportunity that you're applying for is important to you. So both a scholarship and an RU program, they want to make sure that this opportunity is good for you. And so they want to know that you're getting a lot out of it. Nobody wants to give a scholarship to somebody who doesn't need it, right? Who isn't going to appreciate it, right? And so they want to know, what is this opportunity? Why is this important to you? And then how does it fit into your aspirations? So thinking about an RU program, people who are deciding on which students to choose for that program really want to make sure that they're making a difference in the student's education, the student's path journey. And then they also want to make sure that that it's a good stepping stone for you, that this is the right kind of position for you to go on your journey, right? So they want to know, what are your aspirations and how this program or the scholarship will help you achieve your academic and professional goals, right? And then it's always good to be in that mode. Not only how will this program help you, but how will you help this program, right? So if you can explain a little bit about how your skills can contribute to the research, then that's useful too, because that person who's looking at your application is understanding that you're trying to give to them is not just get from them this position, right? So those are the things that you might want to describe in your personal statement. You can address what might appear to be gaps or weaknesses in other aspects of your application. So a lot of the students that I see at Century College, sometimes they've taken a break from school. And so it gives them a time to explain what happened during that break, right? So if you're sending in a resume or something along with this personal statement, then you can explain something in your resume, right? So you can explain, or maybe if you're sending in, it's a scholarship and you're sending in your academic record, well, you might have gone to different schools, or you might have tried school once and didn't work out, and now you're back. And this is a place where you can explain those kinds of things that might otherwise be red flags if you don't address them, right? So that's a possibility that you can do in this personal statement as well. And it's also just a good place to show your writing ability, right? That you can write complete sentences that make sense, right? So that's a good thing too. So just taking one example, the MnDrive application. So I know you're working with MnDrive faculty in this project, but your application wasn't the official MnDrive application. I believe that their official MnDrive application, at least in past years, had this statement from it. It said, submit a personal statement that's no longer than 500 words, which is a few paragraphs, and addressing the following. Express why you wish to participate in this research program and what you hope to gain through the experience, including any information that you feel supports your request to participate, such as research experiences, coursework, employment, internships. So this is, I've looked at a bunch of applications for some of the research opportunities in the Twin Cities, and they're pretty similar to this. They want to know kind of what your background is, so that why it supports your request. So that's kind of some of your background, and then what you hope to gain from the experience, right? So this is specifically from the MnDrive application a couple of years ago. I took it word for word. It also said, describe your career goals and how you plan to reach them through graduate education or future employment. So it was that second part was in there as well. So those are some things that might be requested from you. What happens is maybe each program or scholarship that you apply to has its own little blurb that you'll want to pay attention to. So you might have a standard personal statement and you might have to tweak it a little bit depending on what they're asking for, right? So I've done that with things like cover letters and stuff too. Usually you don't have just one that you give to everything. You have to modify it a little bit for each program that you're applying for. So what does that 500 words consist of? Well, you'll probably have an opening paragraph. So we'll talk about what that is. What are good things to include in that? You'll have a skills and knowledge section, probably, that talks about some of your skills and knowledge that you currently have, so they have an idea of what your background currently is. Then you start thinking about your future, so that you can explain to them what kind of future goals that you have, what kind of career goals you have. And then you just wrap it up in a closing statement. So this might be, roughly 4 paragraphs. You might have more paragraphs in the middle here, but 500 words isn't a ton, right? So let's talk about that opening paragraph. So what might that be? Well, if you're thinking about applying for something that's pretty competitive, then the readers of these personal statements are going to be reading a ton of them, right? So you would like to have some kind of intriguing story or quote to start off, right? Why do you want that? Because you want to draw the readers in. It kind of sets you apart from other people, that they'll remember you based on this kind of story in the beginning. It might serve as a theme throughout the personal statement. So we'll see, you might want to reference it again later in the personal statement, or maybe at the end. It could also explain how your interest developed, right? So it's telling you that personal part of the personal statement, that they want to get to know you. So it might do that. And it could open the door to sharing an experience that might not otherwise fit into the essay, right? So you can get kind of personal with it. So any of those kind of things would be useful. It draws the reader in, it serves as a theme, explains your interest, right? So a story or quote, yeah, something like that. You might also, after that story or quote, explain why you wish to participate in the program. So it might fit in that part. And you can specify too, they often want to know what you hope to gain through the experience, right? So all of that would be kind of something that you might be able to put in your personal statement. So what might that look like? So an opening paragraph story, I don't know, I'm not a storyteller, right? What am I going to say? I am not a really good storyteller. And so I have to work on things like this and think about what would make a good story. So a story that relates to how you chose your career path, something that inspired you, something that taught you, right? So these are just some examples here. A memorable, self-defining experience. Some people have this, like, oh, they took this course and all of a sudden I understand what genetics is and I want to study genetics because this makes so much sense, right? Or they might have an experience with, a family member getting sick and they were in the hospital all the time and it led them to want a career that was related to the medical field, right? Something like that. You might have an experience or an event that impacts you. You might have moved or something and wanted to have a traumatic experience, something like that, that was related to why you chose your area of study. It might have just been something you learned about in school and you thought was really fascinating, and then that you want to go into that area. Or it might be a person, it might be a teacher or a family member who's in that discipline, right? So you might want to talk about that. Or maybe it was a relative that, always took you out birding and now you want to go into ornithology or something, right? So maybe it was something you saw on TV or movie or famous person. So lots of different possibilities here. So start thinking about what is your your story, your thing that could be that intriguing way to bring somebody into your personal statement. So while you're thinking about that, I'll just put a couple up here that we can look through. So these were taken from real personal statements that were in one of those resources that I put in the beginning of real students who wrote personal statements. So my determination to study biomedical science originates from my role as the primary caregiver to my father following his heart attack, epilepsy, and decreased mobility. This has enlightened me to the wide variety of uses a single medicine has. So that could a personal kind of thing that drew her to medicine. I find that science subjects suit my inquisitive personality. I enjoy experimenting and understanding how the world works. For my biology independent study module, I chose to explore the process of organ transplantation, specifically the medicines that make it possible. And the next one, my fascination with science developed at a young age, owing to the fact that both my parents and brother are employed in the medical industry. Both my parents are registered nurses and my brother a biomedical scientist. They go on, right? Okay, and I have more examples, but that we could talk about here. But it's the same kind of a thing. Talking about their background and so forth. So we'll go here to the opening paragraph or story. And these are some possibilities of things that you might want to do. Looking at, all of these opportunities and more, right? So just take a few minutes here just to jot down on your paper or write on your document and think about what is it. You can write complete sentences or just phrases, just bullet points about what is it that you might put in your opening paragraph for your story. So we'll take a few minutes just individually so you can think. I'll stop talking and you can think about that. And then since there's only a handful of us, maybe we'll just share out together. We could do it in small groups if we wanted to, but so take about 3 or 4 minutes just to jot down what you think you might talk about, and then we'll share those. We'll take 4 minutes. All right, welcome back. So hopefully that gave you a few minutes to think about what your personal story is like and is going to be, or one possibility. Of course, it doesn't have to be set in stone. So we're going to share those. I will read just a couple more just to get you in the idea and give you some time to think about what you're going to say. And you don't have to have it, and we don't expect it to be sentences, but if there's an idea that you thought about, we're going to have you share those. So I'll just share a couple of these, and then you can share what you were thinking about during that time. So my grandfather used to be a teacher in biology, and I really enjoyed reading and looking through his textbooks when I was a child. He is the person who first introduced me to the world of natural science and inspired me to further explore that field of study. Another one was, I first discovered science at the age of 10 when I read a set of junior encyclopedias, which introduced me to a world full of diversity. And then the next one here, I was 18 years old when I saw my first computer. 5 years later, I'm applying to the doctoral program in computer science. So some of these sound like they were a little bit older, maybe. Junior encyclopedias were books. Probably don't know what those are now. But so those were just some ideas. And if you would like to share, what were you thinking about? What might you put in a personal statement?
I wrote a lot. I don't know what to say yet.
Okay. Anything that you'd like to share, maybe the idea of it?
Yeah, so yeah, it's hard for me to choose a part. Basically I just said like I gave an example of like well, first was my mother, who was like a very hardworking person. Like she had the work ethic of like 10 people. And that was really inspiring. But then I went on to a roller coaster. It's like, well, that's what science feels to me. It's like being on a roller coaster and cresting the peak, and yeah, something like that. I don't know.
No, those are great ideas. Yeah, awesome. Thanks for sharing. Anyone else? What do you think? What came to mind?
I did a project in my science class, and like I think it was like my 7th grade year, and we were building an aquaponics system, and I guess that kind of being able to see plants grow in a different type of environment kind of fueled my passion for plants and the environment. And
Awesome.
yeah, I could probably write about that.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds really intriguing and interesting. Good. Anyone else? All right. If you didn't share this time, we're going to have to share next time. Okay. So hopefully you're getting ideas about what to write. You might not have sentences yet. That's fine. But when you do get to the point where you're writing the sentences for it, feel free to be creative, right? Descriptive, thinking about why you're writing this personal statement. Somebody wants to get to know you. You have just a few sentences to explain that, right? So, or explain that experience, right? So whatever it is that you're talking about, you're going to want to, use first person rather than a scientist are always thinking in, third person and take ourselves out of it. So that's why it's kind of hard for us sometimes. But here it's about you. It's not about, this research project or something. It's you have to put yourself in that. And you just want to share a little bit about you and what matters. And I know that's kind of hard to do sometimes on paper, or hard to do if you're a private person. But that's what one of the goals of this is. it's nice to be able to convey what motivates you, right, in that first paragraph, to show your passion. Because once you get, into things, you're going to have a passion for it, and you want to show that in what you write. So you can make it engaging and interesting. That's the idea. If that was something that changed your life, or something, then you can explain what that is or why it is. Maybe you don't have something that changed your life, but you just learned about something, or you had something interesting that is connected to why you want to study what you want to study. And then you'd like to draw those connections to that research program, that you'll gain more experience in this program to, fuel your passion for this, or whatever it is, right? So those are some ideas. Okay, so hopefully you got to start anyway, some ideas, some thoughts, some brainstorming, and that opening paragraph, right? Then the next section is going to be talking about your skills or knowledge. And I've talked with students in the past, and they're like, I don't have any skills. That's not true. Even if you're early on in your education, you do have a lot of skills. So a paragraph or more about this, you can talk about your academic background and how those skills relate to this position. So things like specific courses that might apply, specific projects. So Lena, you talked about a project that you did in one of your courses, classes. And so, that's good, because you can build off of that in your next paragraph, talking about what skills you learned in that project. Lab techniques. So this program is great that you're in, because you're going to be learning all these lab skills, right? So you can start developing those skills that you can maybe put on your resume, or you can link to in this personal statement. You can expand upon those techniques that maybe apply to your field, right? Or in chemistry, we use lots of equipment. So you might want to be talking a little bit about the equipment that you used for a research project or in your classes, right? So that the person who's reading this, especially if it's for an REU program, they know what your background is, and that, you've used an HPLC and GC mass spec and so forth, so you can use some of that language and that terms and jargon in this area if you're trying to convey what kind of techniques, because those are common in if you're applying to REU. People are going to know what those terms mean, right? If it's a scholarship, maybe not as much, but in an REU application, you probably can use that jargon, right? And then even if you maybe haven't had a lot where you think there's skills, you might have some soft skills that you're going to be wanting to highlight. Maybe you worked in teams on projects. Having those team skills, the communication skills, the small group work skills is something that you might want to highlight as well, that you're a team player, not just an individual. You'll certainly want to talk about this experience that you had. This would be good to have in that skills and knowledge section. Maybe you're doing tutoring in your field, or maybe you're helping out in a lab in your field. And so all of those things are good things to have as well. So let's again brainstorm and think about what skills that you could highlight or kind of work into the prose of this paragraph or two. What kind of skills or knowledge? And I find when it comes time to write that personal statement, if you kind of brainstorm, I should include this, it makes it easier to kind of write those sentences, because you know what your targets of putting in there are. So this can just be a bullet point kind of list of what things that you might want to include in this paragraph. So once again, grab that paper or type in that document, and I'll give you a couple of minutes just to brainstorm those ideas as well. We'll shoot for about 3 minutes, maybe. All right, so I want a few people to share. While you're thinking about what to share, I have a few more bullet points here that talk about what when you go to the writing process, what you want to do. You want to be specific again, right? So be specific and use examples, not just general terms, but a specific example would be good. And then during this process as well, you can again show why these skills make you a good person for this RU program or the scholarship or whatever, right? So you can show why you're the right person for that position. And then you can discuss why you think that program will benefit your talents. So those are sometimes the things that the program wants you to know or wants you to include. So those are things in the writing process, you can incorporate those ideas as well. But thinking about just your skills, just listing your skills, would you come up with? Who wants to share?
I basically I wasn't having a easy time with this. I just said I tutored chemistry courses for a while.
Okay.
That's kind of where I'm stuck. I mean,
Okay, so maybe when you have you taken like organic chemistry yet, or
yeah, okay. So including like classes is okay. Courses
well,
in the field, okay.
thinking about the different instrumentation, you probably used GC or maybe an HPLC or an IR or something, right? So you've used different instrumentation that you could put in there, maybe
Okay.
different techniques that you've done. Yeah, so Chris, I think you unmuted.
Yeah, I was just gonna like include like participation in this, I guess, research program and also just basic lab skills like pipetting and titrations.
Yeah, sure. All that's good. And you'll get more lab skills in this program as well. So what about you? Computer science. Let's see, is that just Ashley? I think.
Well, I kind of wrote down bullet points, like how I have experience with Python, C++, and Java, and how
Yep.
I'm kind of looking into how to use Java FX to create pop-up windows with, you're creating digital images, and
Yeah.
I'm kind of looking into how to use buttons on it so the user can interact and like a calculator, you could input numbers and then you push a button to say calculate and then it just outputs the results.
Yeah.
I'm not really familiar with it, but I figured it'd be useful, so I'm looking more into it.
Yeah, that's awesome. So maybe even this brainstorming will help you identify too some kind of skills that you want to be able to put on this personal statement and so that you can look into. Awesome. Yeah. In biology, your biology folks, there's lots of techniques, right? You guys want to share? Now, did you have your biology session already? Let's see.
Yes, we kind of, yes.
Yeah, it looks like I have your schedule.
I think we have another section of it to do.
Okay. Well, my computer froze. Let's see. Oh, there we go. All right, good. Okay, so hopefully you have some skills there. Yep, and you can think about things that you learned in lab, as Chris said, like pipetting and different kinds of techniques. In biology, you have a lot of kind of techniques that you'd probably be looking at: cultures, bacterial cultures, PCR prep, that kind of stuff that you might have talked about, and so forth.
I do have a question.
Yeah, sure.
So, I mean, a lot of this stuff in labs, like, so yeah, I've done like titrations, like it seems like a long time ago. So like I have maybe forgotten exactly what it is. Is that like the things that you've probably forgotten, but maybe pick up like a bicycle?
Yeah.
Is that information you could add, or is that something you want to leave out?
Yeah, so I mean, I think you'll have a resume too, where there'll be a lab skills section there. So the lab skills section in the resume would be kind of listing things, and you could certainly list it there because you remember how to do it, right? If it's not something that you've done, maybe in this section, it might not be pertinent to what you're going to write your sentences about, right? If there's something more important or knowledge, other knowledge that you might be interested in conveying to them, right?
Okay.
And I think this section will help too once you do get started more in your research project that you're doing for this program. You might develop more skills and it might be more clear kind of what you could talk about, right?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Good. Okay. So then there's that section that's kind of on career goals, right? So usually they're asking something about this, so this can go kind of in the middle along with your skills, and you could do goals first and then skills. It's up to you, really. It's just how the flow works for your particular personal statement. But you want to think about what are those aspirations? What are those kind of beyond school goals as well? Where do you want to end up? That might be kind of an idea. If you have an ideal job, you could be talking about that, or the kind of work when we talked about the different kinds of things that you kind of do in a job, if it's lab work, or if you want to run a program or do research in a certain area, right? So you could talk about those kinds of things. You could explain kind of how you're going to get there. So you can say, I'm transferring to the U of M to get my bachelor's degree, and then I want to go to graduate school, and I want to, teach at a four-year college, or whatever your plan is. If you have any of that plan worked out, if you don't, that's okay too. But you can talk about things if you have ideas for aspirations for what they want to be. And then you can kind of weave in how this opportunity will help you in that next step when you reach your goals, to reach your goals. So whether that is, the scholarship will help you get your bachelor's degree so that you can go on to graduate school and go to this teaching job. Or this RU program will help you learn about your field and try to decide which area that, or you think you're interested in genetics and you're doing this research project in genetics, and you'll find out if you really love it and you have that passion for it, if it works for you, right? So you can kind of explain how this opportunity will help you reach your goals. Okay, so that's your career goals. So just take a couple minutes and think about what is it that you would be writing about maybe for your career goals. Do you have career goals? You can jot them down. Do you have, education goals that lead to those career goals? You can write those down as well. Thinking about, what is it that you want to be doing in 10 years when you're done with your education or something, so just take an opportunity now, just a couple minutes here, write down those things, so you capture them so that you can maybe put them into your personal statement. I'll give you a couple minutes for those. And let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you.
I have a quick question though. The Pfeiffer.
Yep.
Is it not enough to say that your goal is to want to track, I mean, your goal is that you want to transfer to a university in order to get your bachelor's?
Well, if you have any ideas past that, it's also good to explain those. Like, are you interested in getting a master's or a PhD? Or if you have a specific area that you would like to go into, if you don't, that's okay too. So really in this section, it's kind of as long as you kind of need it to be, right? So if you haven't thought about kind of those aspirations or beyond getting a bachelor's degree, maybe you want to start thinking about those. Otherwise, it can be wide open too, right? So yeah, I mean, if you, for example, you have a lot of skills that you're developing, if your skills section is longer and your career goals is shorter, that's okay too, right?
All right, got it.
Yeah, so thinking about this overall as a personal statement, remembering back to what those goals are of the personal statement, like if it's an RU program, they want to learn kind of where you're at in your education, what your passion is, and kind of where you're headed. And you can work those things in many different ways and expand on the things that are best for you at this moment. So if you're working on skills and really developing those, and that's kind of where your mindset is, and you want to expand in that section, and you certainly will be showing your passion for what you're interested in learning there. And then the career goals might be a little bit smaller because you're kind of working on those skills now and you don't have that path in mind. That's perfectly fine. Maybe you don't have a lot of skills now, but you know where you want to be and what you want to learn. And so maybe then you'll talk more about your career goals because you don't have as many skills at the moment, but you plan to do these things and get these skills and want to work in this field and so forth. So just keeping in mind this kind of giving you a formula, but this formula is variable and can be tailored to what you need at this point. And the main goals, if we think about what those goals of the personal statement are, you want to be answering questions like, if we go back to in the beginning here. The importance of it is that they want to hear from you, your story in your own voice, making a case for yourself. Things like why this opportunity is important to you, how it fits into your goals and aspirations, how to help you achieve those ambitions, and then understand something about you. As long as you're answering the questions specifically within that are being asked for you from the place you're either applying for the RU for, or the scholarship you're applying for, as long as you're answering those questions, right, you can stray from this kind of formula I'm giving you, right? So it's just the idea of these paragraphs is just to try to give you an outline. You certainly can modify it as long as you're explaining and answering the questions within the place that you're applying for, then that's fine, right? And so some sections you might expand more on, some sections you might have less on. It's up to you. And so like this one, it said, describe your career goals and how you plan to reach them through graduate education or future employment. And so, you have to say something about maybe beyond your bachelor's degree, explain whether you want to go right in the field or go into graduate education, and then maybe some ideas about what you want to work on, possibly, and it doesn't have to be set in stone, but yeah, so you can tailor it to whatever, where you're at in your process right now, and then the place that you're applying it for, right? Because everybody's going to have a little bit different expectations of the personal statement. So it's most important to keep in mind when you're applying to it to look at that, what they're asking for, and just make sure that you've addressed those things in your personal statement. Okay, so good. So those are some career goals. Hopefully you have some ideas as to maybe what you could put in there, or at least, what your logical next steps are in reaching your goal. And then the last paragraph is kind of a closing paragraph. So you can summarize things. It can be just a couple of sentences. You might, some stories are good stories when you kind of talk about that story in the beginning and then you reference it at the end. So you can kind of reference it back to summarize things. So those are a couple of ways in which you can end things, right? Is just a couple of sentences for a quick summary, or circle back to that story that you did in your opening paragraph and summarize from there. So at this point, what I'd like to do is give you a chance to talk with others in breakout rooms. So you have hopefully some notes down, and if you want to share with other people, so I'll give you breakout rooms with like 3 people in each. It'll be roughly, and so you can share with other people what you've written so far. Maybe you want to share the stuff that came easy to you, you can share that, and then start talking about the stuff that's harder. Maybe certain people have sections that's easier for them, and then listening to what they put down, maybe it will give you ideas to brainstorm a little bit more for your areas. And so in your breakout rooms, just share with each other, and it'll take a few minutes each person. So we'll be doing 3 breakout rooms assigned just automatically. So I don't know how much time you've gotten to meet each other. So in the very first, just introduce your name again, kind of what your major is, to remind them where you're going to school, and then just share what you've got so far for your personal statement. And then maybe you can brainstorm with each other how you could help each other fill out the harder parts, or maybe give each other ideas about those harder parts. Sound good? All right. So I'll go ahead and do these, and will be like maybe 10 minutes because we have 3 people, so that's 3 minutes per person, something like that. And then we'll come back together for some final tips about this and questions and answers. Okay. Okay, the room should be open and you can join the rooms. Now, Lena, let me know if you're having a hard time joining your room.
Hey, Joanne, I have to hop off for my next meeting, but I just wanted to say thank you, and I really appreciate you hosting this session today, and it's some really great content. So I'm just excited to hear back from the students later.
All right, I think everybody is back. So welcome back. Hopefully that was useful for you to connect with other people and see what they were thinking about writing, and maybe they gave you some more ideas or that kind of thing. Hopefully this has been useful, at least some brainstorming and some writing down. So when you have to write a personal statement for some reason, it's not quite so daunting for you, that you'll be able to get it done more quickly and efficiently and know kind of the expectations for it. So I wanted to just go through some overall other tips to give you about your personal statement, and then we'll open it up to any questions that you have, either about personal statements or about grad school. Maybe something's come up about grad school that you were thinking about. Or maybe anything else. You have full access to me for a little while longer here, because we weren't supposed to get done at noon. Looks like we'll finish a little earlier. We weren't supposed to get done until noon, but it looks like we'll finish a little earlier. But I'm available, so if you have questions about anything, my background is chemistry. I teach, and any kind of questions that you have about anything, really. Okay, so we'll finish up here. Some other tips, again, I kind of stressed this a couple of times already, but pay attention to the little directions that you're given to write the statements. So that's kind of going to tell you what's required in your personal statement for that particular position. So some of the positions, if there are RUs, are going to be kind of similar. They might even be similar to scholarships, what they want you to write for scholarships. But you're going to have to kind of pay attention to that, and you might have to tailor it for each kind of position or each scholarship. But at least you have some ideas, and maybe if you have, keep a personal statement with some optional paragraphs that you could take out or put in, depending on what's asked for, right? So that you can tailor your response to that particular question that's being asked. Because if they ask certain questions, they really want to see answers on those questions. And then you want to remember who your audience is, right? If it's a selection committee at a school for a scholarship or an RU program, it's probably a faculty member. It's probably faculty who are reading these and looking at these. So if you're applying to an RU, you can kind of use that jargon of the techniques in the field, because they're going to be in that field too, where they're going to know what that is, right? And so that instrumentation, for example, you don't have to explain what a GC mass spec is, they're going to know that, right? And so you can use some of that jargon because they're going to be faculty members, right? If it's a scholarship, maybe not quite so much, because it's not maybe as field specific, right? It may be a scholarship for all of STEM, or it might be a foundation that has people reading that. And so it might be, you might, tailor it to that kind of an audience, right? And then a personal essay should have, reflect kind of who you are and kind of your tone of voice, right? And hopefully it has a positive feel for it. You have a lot of passion if you're in this program, right? Because you wanted to do some kind of research and make time away from your studies and your work to do some kind of research and learn more about it. And so you probably have this great passion. And when you talk about and just shared your skills, Ashley, or your goals, Devin, you have this passion in your voice that you really are interested in that. And so you want that to come through in your essay, right? You can convey confidence. It's going to be pretty hard to come across as arrogance, probably. As Minnesotans, anyway, we're shyer about, bragging and that kind of thing. So feel free to kind of convey that confidence in your abilities, right? And you want to kind of take that leadership and talk about active voice, not passive voice. So that you did this, not this was done, right? But that you were the person that's doing this and you did this. And so as scientists, we tend to, right? Maybe you haven't written enough as scientists, but as a scientist, it's really hard. We get in this mode of, the experiment and the things happen. It's not, you don't use your thing, and you don't really say in scientific voice, I did this and I did this and I did this. It's like this experiment was done, and this thing did happen, and this experiment was done. And so it's always kind of this taking you out of it. That's how scientists tend to write. But this is about you. So feel free to use that first person active voice, right? And the more specific examples, the better. So you want to, demonstrate the qualities that you're trying to express. So this is similar to like a cover letter as well for a resume. When you do that, you want to not just say, I have great communication skills. You want to show that example that shows that you have good communication skills, right? So when you think about those skills, it's often best to kind of bring up that project that you worked on to get those skills, right? To explain something about that rather than just listing those skills. So any kind of specific examples, the more that you have of those, the better that'll convey to people who you are and how you get those skills. And you don't have to worry about using big language, just like you're normally talking to somebody. That's perfectly fine. You don't have to use words that you normally don't use in your speaking or your writing. So just keep it simple and natural. And then it's really good to have somebody read your writing, right? And so I know it feels like you're sharing yourself with somebody, but people have good, if you choose the right people to share it with. So there are people usually that are at your school who might be in the career center. They often will read resumes, for example. They can read cover letters. They would be happy to read personal statements, and they'll give you their opinion because they're kind of outside of your area and outside of sciences. So that's a nice viewpoint to have, that somebody who's not even in the sciences can understand what you're saying, or that it conveys what it conveys, right? Professors are happy to help you. Research advisors and mentors, other people that you've come across, staff at your school that you've gotten close with, they're happy to give you constructive feedback, to read it and say, oh, look, like a professor might say, oh, what, we did this in our class, and we could really talk about that because you did such a great job on that project or this assignment, right? So they might even give you ideas for putting in something to put in or include, right? And students who are writing personal statements, they're looking for research experiences or scholarships, and faculty love that ambition in students, and are would be more than welcome to help them, or read something that they've written and give them suggestions. And as faculty aren't shy about giving constructive criticism, so it would be a helpful thing to have professors read that. There's also might be writing centers at your school, and even that, they can help you, maybe not as much with the content, but more about the style and the tone it's conveying, right? They would be good to help you about that with that as well. And then you might have that support system of family and friends that you can always go to, right? So it's always good when you write something to have somebody review it. Sometimes you are so used to reading your writing, you're not realizing kind of the tone or something that comes across, or something that's not clear, right? And even just that grammatical stuff they can help you with, right? So overall, those are some tips for personal statements and helping you with that. So I'll stop the share so we can kind of chat. Are there things that came up maybe in your small group that you had questions about that you would want to ask in the bigger group? Is there something about personal statements or grad school that came to mind? Questions that you didn't get a word in edgewise when I was talking so much? Anything that you want to ask at this time? You can go in the chat, or you can unmute and ask questions, or anything else you want to talk about, maybe something I referenced but didn't explain.
I just have a, not really relating to this. I was just wondering what your favorite kind of chemistry was.
Oh, so yeah, I did my PhD in physical chemistry. So I used lasers to excite molecules. So like excite a bond in a molecule to make it vibrate. and then to see if that bond would selectively in the molecule be the bond that broke when I reacted it with something else. So I used another laser to actually make an atom rather than a molecule. So I kind of broke apart an atom so that my small molecule would react with an atom. And then I used a third laser to excite the products so I could see which products were made. So when you excite some products with a laser, sometimes, depending on what they are, they fluoresce. And then you can detect that fluorescence, that light that's given off. And so you can identify whether or not I broke that bond to make the molecule or whether or not a different bond broke to make the molecules in the products. So because chemistry, you can't see the molecules, I enjoy kind of using lasers so that we could try to see molecules. So that's what my PhD was on, but I haven't really done research since then because I've been more just into teaching. And so what I'm most interested in is helping students understand chemistry when it can seem like it's a really hard topic to kind of understand. So the challenge of ways in which I can explain things or assignments that I can do or things that I can incorporate to help students understand chemistry because it's kind of difficult for many students to understand. So that's kind of what all of my scholarship has been on since I started teaching. But yeah, my area was physical chemistry. So I really liked physics like you do, and thinking about what are those laws that are fundamental to molecules and things in general and how they behave, right? So you can talk about molecules in the gas phase or the liquid phase or the solid phase and kind of what is it that are the fundamental properties that make them behave, right? So that kind of always interested me. Spectroscopy using lasers to understand what molecules you have and kind of what their behavior is. So yeah.
Okay, yeah, I might be aiming towards that physical chemistry after all. So
Yeah.
it's very interesting, and I know there's a lot that kind of goes into it, but
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, so some of the graduate work that I did was published in the Journal of Physical Chemistry, but it was also published in the Journal of Chemical Physics. So really there's kind of a whole area that deals with either physical chemistry or chemical physics. So yeah.
I actually think it's pretty amusing because there's those two, but they have like different ways to say the same thing, you know?
Right.
Well, yeah. So yeah, I'll have to check those out. I haven't heard of those, so.
Yeah, when you start reading, you looked at how to read journal articles. I think Ashley mentioned that. And in your research that you get assigned, you'll have some journal articles. So that's just some journals that are in that area between chemistry and physics. Yep. All right, other questions anyone has? Now's your chance. So if you looked at your schedule of what you're going to be doing, let's see, today is Friday the 21st. So you've had a couple of weeks already. Looks like on Monday, you're going to go in person at Century for some lab skills. Some more with Jessica Bell, some more PCR data analysis and making solutions in sounds like good stuff. So are you most excited for like the lab skills or your research days? Have you figured out?
I like lab skills. I also like the research since mine is more hands-on.
Okay.
I can't decide which one's my favorite so far.
Okay. It's a good position.
It's always nice to have more knowledge, so.
Yeah. What about the rest? Go ahead.
Sorry. I just wanted to say I agree. I like both of them. They're really fun.
Ashley, I'm sure you're looking forward to the following week. Is that the following week? Or when it's going to be the coding stuff with Amy.
For sure.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I'd be interested in that too. It's
Yeah,
funny,
they-
I was stuck deciding between science and computer science
Mm.
or physical sciences.
Yeah, it looks like July 8th and 10th. You're going to have Amy Larson, who's more in the computers. So you'll do some computational pre-work and then some computation and coding. So that would be fun. I'm not going to be around for that, but I'd also like to see that because I don't know a lot about coding. So that would sound like fun. Yeah, and I know your biology was some of the biology stuff that Jessica Bell did. I guess she didn't really do that till this coming Monday. Oh no, she did it some Mondays. The bacterial cultures and PCR prep, was that a review for you? For Rianne? I think someone else was biology, I can't remember. Anyway, just looking at your schedule, it just sounds really exciting and interesting. And I won't be seeing you guys again, but once you get, I don't know who's going to send it out. Jessica's going to send it out, or Liz, the PowerPoints, and I'll have them send my email as well. So feel free to email me if you have any questions or anything. Otherwise, that's it. That's all I have for you today. If you don't have any more questions, just good luck in the rest of this program. It sounds really exciting, and we're so glad that you're doing this program. It's the first time it's been done in this iteration. So you're our test project, so you're a pilot study. So we're really excited to have you, and have fun the rest of the time. We'll see you guys. Thanks so much.
Thank you
Yeah,
very
thanks.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
I did have a quick question, but more personal. I knew a Camden Pfeiffer. That's not any relation to you, right? Okay. I was just curious.
Yep.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Bye.
All right. Bye.